sports fans, another episode of New York State of Sports, episode 6. Rick Keeler here with you on IE Sports Radio. We got the takes that never sleep from the city that never sleeps, and we got a great show coming up for you today. It's not even the start of spring training games yet, and the Mets have a big injury that affects their starting rotation. We'll dive into that. We'll talk the Nets. Getting rid of the head coach as Jacques Vaughn is fired. What's next, and should somebody else be on the hot seat in Brooklyn? We'll recap an eventful stadium series in the NHL. Rick Pitino makes eventful comments as St. John's losing continues. And the MLS starts this weekend. So who better to talk about it? We'll have a special guest, Joseph Lowery from Backheeled on the show. We'll look ahead to NYCFC and the Red Bulls. So all coming up next here on New York State Sports on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all those sports. In a second. So I didn't expect to lead with this topic going in, but spring training, you would think excitement, games are starting, it's fun, and the Mets get a big blow to their starting rotation. Kodai Senga, who is going to be the ace of their team, is going to begin the season on the injured list with a moderate posterior capsule strain in his right shoulder. He's going to be shut down from throwing until the symptoms go away. And once he starts throwing, it's going to take him about 6 weeks to get going before he can get into a major league game. It's not doom and gloom for the Mets because, again, this is not a injury that should expect him to be out for the season. And David Stearns, the president of baseball operations, said earlier today that he still expects Senga to make a bulk of the starts this year. That's just a temporary setback. But it's hard to ignore for a Met team that needs everything to go right. They didn't make the big splash this winter. From the perception, it looks like that this front office and Steve Cohen and the ownership are looking to kind of wait till 2025 to make the big moves after they missed on Yamamoto. But you're looking at a rotation right now where Jose Quintana is likely starting opening day. And after having Scherzer and Verlander last year, and let's give the Mets this much. The fact of the matter is, if they had both of them here, they're both hurt. Scherzer's missing the first half of this year. Verlander's had a setback that will cause him to delay his start to this year. So the Mets were paying injured pitchers anyway. Now you throw Senga into the mix, who a lot of people have high optimism for. He showed dominance in the second half of last year. Played himself into the Rookie of the Year conversation. That ghost fork is what everybody loves talking about. The Mets have decent depth at the back end of the rotation. When you look at pitchers like Tyler McGill, who's developed a new splitter, we'll see how that works this spring. Joey Lucchesi, Jose Butto, Max Kranick was a name that a lot of people think will get involved at the back end of the rotation. They have good pitching prospects in the farm system, Christian Scott, Mike Vassell, and Dom Hamill. But even Stearns said on Thursday they're not exactly ready to pitch yet at the major league level. So those are guys they want to keep stashed in the minor leagues for good reason. And this is even including Blade Tidwell, who shined last year in the minors. So the Mets have a couple of options. The problem they have is if you're going to be that wild card team, and that's what the Mets seem to be, because you look at Atlanta being as dominant as they are, the Phillies are still the Phillies. You need everything to go right to be that 80 to 85 win wild card team. And you're already down a lot of innings in your starting rotation, because Senga was not only expected to be dominant, he was expected to be the guy that's going to give you 6 innings a night. Because when you look at guys like Sean Manaea, Adrian Hauser, Luis Severino, Quintana to an extent, they can't be as reliable to go 6 innings. And this is a Met bullpen that has some intrigue to it. You like Diaz coming back, Ottavino, Brooks Raley. But the depth at least has veteran depth, but you don't want to tax it too much. And in this day and age where starting pitchers don't go deep into games anyway, it's tough to see that would play a big factor. And if they get off to a bad April and May, now you're going to lead to the whole, the Mets trade Pete Alonso rumors and all that stuff. You don't want to get to that point yet. So while it's not doom and gloom yet, I would say it's a big cause for concern. Because I haven't even played a game yet in spring. Games start this weekend. And you're already getting bad news. Ask the Yankees last year. Carlos Rodon was hurt beginning of spring training, then had a back issue, then didn't pitch till July. That's probably the worst case scenario. I would think that Stearns didn't give a timetable. You'd like to have him by May. But that's not even easy to really guarantee at this point. So a lot more challenges for Senga, and we'll see what goes from there. Again, follow me on Twitter at Rickinator555. That's at RECK, letter I, Nader, Lincoln, Terminator 35s. Follow the show on Twitter at NY State Sports IE. Be sure to comment here in the chat. I see a bunch of people here. Terrence here, Ralph's here, Larry, what's up? Jen, what's up? We will have our MLS guest later in the show. It was, I will give a heads up, it was pre-recorded, so we'll play some drops from my conversation earlier today. That should be a lot of fun. Ralph saying, poor Mets suffer major injury every spring training. Last year, Edwin Diaz. Diaz was different. And I wasn't here last year, so Diaz, to me, with that torn Achilles, that could have happened in spring training just as easy. It could have happened in the World Baseball Classic. I'm a big fan of the WBC, so Senga's original issue was yesterday. They shut him down because of arm fatigue, which is normal. It's not... I mean, pitchers do experience that. That's why it takes, as much as we say, spring training takes too long, there's a reason it does. You got to build up these pitchers' arms, get them throwing 2 innings their first outing, then 3, then 4, then 5, and everything else. You're going to have these things happen, and that's why you have to build up depth. And at least for Stearns, he got a bunch of quantity rather than quality. And the big question would be, should the Mets pay Blake Snell or should the Mets pay Jordan Montgomery? They're not looking to spend. And I'll give you the perfect example of going outside of the pitching market. This afternoon, Jeff Passan from ESPN reported that Gio Urshela signed a $1.5 million one-year deal with the Tigers. You're telling me the Mets, who have an issue at third base, where they've got Brett Beatty and they've got Mark Vientos and they got guys competing for that spot and need some veteran help, didn't want to give Gio Urshela $1 million? Who's played in New York, who's succeeded in New York, who can give you some positional versatility, can play some short too, can be a good bat off the bench, and you let him go to Detroit? But that's case in point. And right now, it doesn't look like that the rest of baseball is going to give in to the Scott Boras clients. There's been all the rumors on X about Blake Snell going to the Yankees. Again, I still don't see it. The Yankees don't want to make a second mistake in giving Blake Snell Carlos Rodon money. Unless it's going to be some short-term deal, which, if it is a short-term deal, it costs Hal Steinbrenner in the front office double because of the luxury tax. So they're not going to do that. And Jordan Montgomery, I like him, but he's not worth the asking price. Even though he had a great second half for Texas. Ideally, he should go back to the Rangers, but with their salary issues and their payroll concerns, they probably can't afford what he's asking for. So those guys are stuck. So if you're looking for the Mets to make that splash, if they wouldn't even give Gio Urshela $1 million, what makes you think that they're going to look to make that effort into the rotation? They're not. They're going to camp, see what they have, and if they have to make a trade, let's say at the end of spring for another depth guy, they might do that. Let's say a guy out of options doesn't make the team, they may look to make a deal that way. But for right now, you're not getting to that point. On a Yankee note, Aaron Boone said earlier today that Juan Soto is going to make his spring debut on Sunday. It should be a lot of fun. That game is on Yes, I Believe. So you got some good news on the Yankee side of things. And Aaron Judge seems to think that there's this big move coming. And I guess if you believe in Aaron Judge and you believe in the power of players having an impact on front office decisions, you'd be inclined to believe him, but what's the move? And again, I don't think it's Snell, even though Aaron Judge and Blake Snell have a decent friendship going. I don't see it. So he seems to think the Yankees have one more move there. I don't see it right now. It would have to be a really friendly deal to go a different direction. But starting next week, we'll recap some games and do that for you. I want to remind you that this show, as well as all the IE Sports radio shows, are brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, low in sugar, and high in protein. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet. So we'll take our first time out. We'll come back, and we'll look ahead to Major League Soccer. NYCFC and the Red Bulls get underway this weekend. MLS season started last night with Miami beating Real Salt Lake 2-0. No goals from Lionel Messi, but he ends up setting up both goals, so he's amazing. But what does the season lie in store for both local teams here? And I had a special guest that I talked to earlier today that's going to help us break that down. You're listening to New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We'll be back right after this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Locke.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That give you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IU Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
to segment 2 here on New York State of Sports on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all the sports. Which keyword back with you here as we get set to talk some soccer. New York City FC, New York Red Bulls getting underway. Both those seasons beginning, at least NYCFC begins Saturday against Charlotte at Charlotte FC at Bank of America Stadium. New York Red Bulls will play Sunday against Nashville in Nashville. Both these teams don't play at home until we get into March, which makes sense because the weather's just extremely cold here. Why would you play home games to start the season? Nevertheless, these are two teams that they're not going to be the favorites in the Eastern Conference, but there's a lot of potential. NYCFC coming off the title a couple of years ago. Red Bulls are constantly in postseason contention. They've become one of the more stable, consistent performers in MLS. And one of the things that I want to bring up is both these teams have a good solid roster. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. We're going to go through some of the basics here. When we look at the Red Bulls, I think one of the key players to watch for their team is Emil Forsberg. And from what I've read, he's a guy coming over from the Bundesliga who could easily make an impact. They've been comparing him to the acquisition of Thierry Henry. It's kind of a similar move for Sandro Schwartz's squad. So to lead into that, again, I spoke with Joseph Lowery, who is a good friend of mine, writes for the site Backheeled, mainly writes over there, does some stuff for the Total Soccer Show, The Guardian, The Athletic. We don't have the interviews entirely, but I did get to ask him a couple of things to play for you guys here. So the first thing I asked him is, what kind of impact can Emil Forsberg have on the Red Bulls this year?
He can have a really big one, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is Emil Forsberg, Swedish international, it's still, or was still, I should say, playing important minutes in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League for RB Leipzig, which is the biggest, the oldest sister in the Red Bull global soccer family. They have clubs in a number of countries around the world. Leipzig is the top of that family. They're the favorite child. He was playing, not every single moment of every single game for them, but he was still playing key minutes for them right up until his move over to the Red Bull sister in this family over in New York. So I think his quality is still very apparent. The other thing is the player he's replacing, sort of not quite like for like, but is absolutely going to be occupying his spot in the lineup, is Luquinhas, a Brazilian attacking midfielder brought in as a designated player a couple of seasons ago and was a complete bust, was a total flop, did not create chances for this Red Bulls team, was not an influential part of their attacking structure. So Emil Forsberg is going to look good, first of all, because he's just good at soccer. And the other thing is that he's getting the benefit, the narrative benefit, of replacing one of the weak links in this team to begin with. He's going to shine bright this year, both in terms of his ability to play a pass and his ability to come up on the score sheet in the final third.
So at least with that kind of potential, Forsberg could help this team keep that postseason moving, because from the likes of in the past, Bradley Wright Phillips, they've got that solid squad there. The key, though, I think when you look at the Red Bulls, a lot of their talent is going to be trying to find that attacker up front. So the other thing I asked Joseph is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this Red Bulls squad?
The Red Bulls' biggest strength still is their ability to create turnovers with their high press. And now, on top of that, it should be to create chances with a couple of the designated players that they brought in over the last 2 seasons in Dante Van Zier. If he hits this year, after a number of issues for him last year, including directing a racist remark towards the San Jose Earthquake's Jeremy Abobasi, and Emil Forsberg. That should be the strength of this team. Few teams in Major League Soccer have more tactical cohesion than the New York Red Bulls, which gives them a benefit and an advantage right from the jump. The weakness is, well, maybe these attacking pieces don't hit quite as much as we think they will, right? The Red Bulls are missing Lewis Morgan all throughout last season. Like, this is a major issue for them if they don't end up having a fully fledged and strong Lewis Morgan. And maybe Forsberg, he's on the wrong side of 30. Maybe he takes a step back, and that's a problem as well.
Moving over to the other side, NYCFC, it's not the same team that's going to be the squad that won the title a couple years ago. A lot of young players in this squad. But there's one player that everybody's excited about for Nick Cushing's team, and that is Jovan Mijatovic, 18-year-old from Serbia. So I asked Joseph, what kind of impact can Mijatovic have on the squad?
it's sky high, man. He's such a good player. He was on the radar of major European clubs, including reportedly Bayer Leverkusen, who currently sit on top of the Bundesliga, beating Bayern Munich to that title if things continue as they have been throughout the season so far. He is really rangy. He's able to drop in and combine. He's also able to lead the line. He's good in the air. He's physical. His touch is good. He checks all of the boxes that you look for in an attacking player. Very, very well-rounded, and I'll be shocked if he's on this side of the Atlantic for long.
So the big question going into these predictions is which team has the chance to finish higher in the standings? And when you hear Joe's opinion, to read it online, these two teams are not that separated from each other.
I have these two teams finishing very, very close to each other in the Eastern Conference, which is by far the better conference this season. It was last year. The MLS Cup winner came from the East. The Supporters' Shield winner came from the East. The top three teams in MLS came from the East. But I do have the I have NYCFC finishing one spot above the New York Red Bulls. I have NYCFC in 7th and the Red Bulls in 8th. Would it surprise me if both of those teams are significantly higher in the standings? Absolutely not. I think they have the quality to do more. Just the East is so good that it's hard to know exactly where some of these teams who were on the outside looking in last year, for the most part, are going to end up in 2024. I think the state is better than last year. Ultimately, the Red Bulls snuck into the postseason in Major League Soccer, a recently expanded postseason field as well, with 2 wildcard spots on top of 7 fully fledged playoff spots in each conference. So 62% of the league makes the postseason. New York Red Bulls snuck in sort of under the wire last year, and NYCFC had their worst ever Major League Soccer campaign. They finished 11th. That is worse than they'd ever done since joining the league several years ago. This year, both teams got stronger in the offseason, and both teams had actually quietly good underlying numbers last year. The Red Bulls were among the best defensive teams in the league, and NYCFC absolutely created chances, but had a difficult time converting those chances. Both clubs have made key moves in the offseason to remedy some of their issues, and I think are among the absolute playoff contenders in the Eastern Conference. Outside of the top tier of surefire trophy contenders, these two teams can cause problems in the.
And look, this is a fun time to get into soccer if you're not a huge soccer fan like myself, because you've got Copa America coming here in the summer, which is going to be a lot of fun. You've got the World Cup coming here in 2026 to the U.S., the final here at MetLife Stadium. And all, I think it bring a lot of buzz to the area, especially when NYCFC gets their own stadium, because I think it's hard to get into a team that doesn't really have a set home. NYCFC sometimes plays the Yankee Stadium, sometimes plays at Citi Field, and it's tough to really grasp a team, and that's what made their title run so impressive a couple years ago, and how good this fan base has been without a permanent home. So soccer is slowly growing here, and I think both these teams have the chance to be pretty good, and ultimately it's going to help the buzz if they are good, because you'll get more eyes on the sport. And especially you'll get more buzz internationally if Messi and Argentina make a deep run. Maybe they get a game at MetLife Stadium during the summer, because that Miami team is fun. When Miami comes to Harrison, New Jersey, or comes to Yankee Stadium in September, a lot of buzz will be on those games. So we'll try to recap them as best we can here on the show. Again, NYCFC will take on Charlotte on Saturday. New York Red Bulls will take on Nashville on Sunday. That should be a lot of fun. I'm going to give you also, you can follow Joseph on Twitter at Josie Lowery, against at JoecLowery on Twitter. Definitely appreciate his insight. He helps educate me on some soccer, and I really do appreciate that. So we'll see what both these teams can do. Again, I think they're pretty even. So coming up next, we'll go into the Brooklyn Nets. I've done 6. This is my 6th show, and I'm talking about a second coach fired in New York, New Jersey. And it might be the show. But we'll talk about Jacques Vaughn getting relieved of his duties by the Brooklyn Nets. What does it mean? And who else should be on the hot seat as well? You're listening to New York State of Sports here at IE Sports Radio. We'll be right back after this.
What's good, everyone? It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. On this station, we cover everything in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. From we cover the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Wings, Texas Rangers, TCU, SMU, we cover it all right here every Wednesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you stay live with me on the Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS. The SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
To the NBA here on New York State of Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. For the last 9 years, IE Sports Radio has brought you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, building tailor-made shows dedicated to all cities around the country. Be sure to follow at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok to keep up with all the sports and the shows. And go to iesportsradio.com. We got news, the blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month, podcast pages, and a shop. Be sure to check out all those cool features on iesportsradio.com. So as I mentioned, 6 shows in, and we've already talking about 2 coaching changes. It's fantastic. Jacques Vaughn gets relieved of his duties by the Brooklyn Nets. 64 and 65, Vaughn was the head coach in his 2 stints with the Nets, and look, it was a matter of time. We talked about it as a possibility when we first did this show, and then right before the All-Star break, the Nets play a back-to-back with the Celtics. They lose the first game, and then they lose to Boston by 50, 136 to 86. And keep in mind, when you look at that box score in particular, Jaylen Brown didn't even play, and the Celtics won by that much. That's flat out embarrassing. To go into the All-Star break like that, it was like they were booking their trip to Cancun. You should lose your job after that kind of game. And the fact of the matter is, the Jacques Vaughn experiment didn't work. And I don't put it all on Jacques Vaughn, because again, there's been so much roster turnover with the Nets, from having KD, Kyrie, and Harden to now trying to rebuild it again. And while they've built up at least a few assets, you have to start wondering if this now starts to fall on Sean Marks. This would be, if Sean Marks makes this next hire, would be the 5th coach he brings in. And how many GMs get a chance to bring in that many coaches? When you look at the Nets head coaches, you're talking about, obviously, Vaughn twice, Steve Nash, which didn't work. Or at least didn't work the way they wanted to. But the big one I think the Nets are regretting is Kenny Atkinson. That was a guy who did a really good job here. and getting the pieces to fit. And they let him go and tried to cater to the stars. And while that's great in the NBA, you got to be very careful when you do that or it backfires on you in a heartbeat. So as of right now, the interim coach is Kevin Ollie. 13-year NBA career, well-liked in the league. Won a national championship with Connecticut. He's coached in the G League. I think that gives him a chance to be the next head coach. But here's what works against Kevin Ollie in this case. I think if you're the Nets, you've got to go big. You can't be hiring the Jacques Vaughns of the world. You got to get a guy with experience. You've got to get a big name because you play in Brooklyn. There is some point to where you have to try to match the Knicks to get some recognition in the area. And get the people to not choose the Knicks who are looking to be in a more better situation than you. They've set up their pieces. You're still in the foundation of building those pieces. So try to build around Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas and getting these pieces to work. So while there are first-year head coaches I would consider for this job, I think J.J. Redick could be an interesting name. We all know Redick has great takes about basketball on ESPN, even if Austin Rivers doesn't agree with what J.J. Redick says about his dad. I think he would still be a good basketball mind to bring in if you wanted to interview him. If you wanted to go local, the head coach at Hofstra, Speedy Claxton, I think would be an interesting fit if you want to go that direction. But if you're going to ignore the lack of experience, I think they need the experienced guys. So there's a couple names I think that would fit the Nets. One being Mike Budenholzer, who did a good job with Atlanta, won a title with Milwaukee. I think he's a good team builder, and he comes with a track record of winning. I think that's what you would need. The other names I think would be like Jeff. If they could get Jeff Van Gundy, that would be fantastic. I think that's the pipe dream, though. Nate McMillan, I think, is another name. Veteran coach. Like, you need guys that have a track record. And I think the question you have to ask if you're a Nets fan is, do you trust Sean Marks to make this next hire? I think Marks has had a decent tenure here. You have to give him credit for bringing in the stars, but do you allow him to basically reconstruct this team and potentially make a 5th and 6th coaching decision? That's up to Josiah and ownership. But it's rare, especially in New York, in this market, that you get that many chances to pick a head coach. The only guy I can really think of that gets that many chances is Brian Cashman, but the Yankees have really hired 3 managers with Cashman: Joe Torre, Joe Girardi, and Aaron Boone. Think just the ability to bring in that many different minds is crazy. And that would mean if you don't bring in Marks, now you have to find a GM and then find a head coach. So I think there is a decent future with Brooklyn, but they've got a little bit of ways to go. I think they made the right move, though. They don't have a first-round pick, so they can't really tank the rest of the way. They've got to find a way to make these pieces work, and they have to find a way to make Mikal Bridges happy. Because if he wants out, you're starting from rock bottom again. And I don't think they can afford to do that, even with the amount of picks that they would get. So this week on the NBA Ledger, Nets are at Toronto tonight, at Minnesota on the 24th, that's Saturday, at Memphis on Monday, and it looks like at Orlando. So Brooklyn, a lot of road games coming up this week before they're back home to end February against the Hawks. As for the Knicks, good showing at the All-Star game for Jalen Brunson. He did well in the three-point contest, didn't win. I thought Jacob Toppin got robbed in the dunk contest to go to the final round. I still think I'm not a huge fan of the dunk contest myself. I prefer the three-point contest. So speaking of three-point, props to Sabrina Ionescu. Great performance against Steph Curry. Put up the same number that would have probably won the actual contest. So you have to give her props for that. Knicks, meanwhile, a tougher schedule out of the break. We talked about it on Saturday a little bit. They're at Philadelphia tonight. Kyle Lowry making his debut for the Sixers. They're home to Boston on Saturday. That's the 8:30 ABC primetime game. Home to the Pistons on Monday. And then home to the Pelicans on Tuesday before hosting Steph Curry and the Warriors a week from today on TNT to wrap up February. Look, it's simple. The Knicks have to find a way to just stay to get through. They'll get DiVincenzo back, which is great news. We'll see what happens with Hartenstein and a couple of those players. Randall's still far from playing. Anunoby's still far from playing. Mitchell Robinson is still far from playing. So they'll start to get some pieces back. They brought in Jacob Toppin on another 10-year deal. So that, no, not a 10-year deal, excuse me, a 10-day deal. It'd be interesting if we got a 10-year deal. But they're starting to get healthier, which is ultimately what they need. Because now if you plug DiVincenzo back in, you plug Hartenstein back in, Jericho Sims is back in, now you're starting to see more depth for this Knicks team. And they're going to need it because it's a big game, especially tonight. This could be for what would be the 4th seed in the East. And you want that 4th seed, you want that home court. We'll stay with basketball here because I want to talk about St. John's, and it's probably the last time I'm going to talk about St. John's until the Big East tournament, unless they pull some major upset, because they haven't really deserved that recognition of conversation. And the pattern just continues with these second half blown leads. They get up at halftime, they take their foot off the pedal, and they keep losing. They did that to Seton Hall on Sunday, and that led Rick Pitino to really blast his team through the media. During his post-game on Sunday, he said, "This is the most unenjoyable experience of my lifetime. We are so unathletic that we can't guard anybody without fouling. If I said I was disappointed, that'd be the understatement of the year." But he didn't just stop there. He started pointing out players. Joel Soriano's slow laterally. He's not fast on the court. Chris Ledlam is slow laterally. Sean Conway's slow laterally. Brady Dunlap's physically weak. And Drissa Traore is slow laterally. We kind of lost this season with the way we recruited. We recruited the antithesis of the way I coach. It's a good group. They try hard, but they're just not very tough. We want coaches to be honest. I don't think we want them to be that honest. But if you're looking at this from a St. John's fan's perspective and a St. John's alum's perspective, like myself, it's been a frustrating year. The expectations were not supposed to be Final Four in year one, but I think a lot of people expected this team to be an NCAA tournament team. And where Pitino took it too far, and he did apologize after the Georgetown win last night, albeit a game where they led by 20 and the lead was down to 3 with a minute to go. So again, those issues keep piling up. You can't say that in this day and age because of recruiting. Because in this era of NIL and the transfer portal, you essentially have to rebuild the whole new team every year. And while this year's team might have reached what it's supposed to get to, meaning I don't know if they could get much further. They're not really a tournament team. Even if they beat Creighton on Sunday at home, I think they'd have to make a run at the Big East tournament to get in because of these struggles. You can't affect what can happen in future years. But it begs the question. If you're paying these players NIL money, are you allowed to rip them through the media? Because they're getting paid. And Pitino, I saw in an interview with John Fanta on his the podcast series Fanta's doing, the Pitino Chronicles, said they're kind of like professionals. What we want a professional coach to do, rip the players through the media. And this is nothing new for Pitino. He's done that for the early part of the season, even when they were winning. He was being honest about the play. But it's a coach that is frustrated with how the season has gone. I think what Pitino screwed up with on Sunday was he did not take accountability for the team he put together. I don't care how late he put the team together. He put the team together. And he got rid of the bulk of the team of last year, said, I want guys that can play for me. And you look at the success of a lot of the recruits, a lot of the players from last year that have left. Pasha Alexander's done a good job at Butler. AJ Storr's done a really good job at Wisconsin. Patino said he tried to keep him. Lundenborg is the transfer at UAB who's doing a really good job. Dylan Adewusu, who hit some clutch shots for Seton Hall down the stretch. You telling me he couldn't fit into this system? But Patino wanted to blow it up, and you look at guys, Jordan Dingle's underachieved despite his great game last night. Chris Ludlam hasn't been what people expected. And what I've been concerned about is Joel Soriano, where a month ago he looked really good, and now he has some spurts where he's really good, but at other times it's like, why isn't he making that same impact? And that was a guy, the captain of the team, that Patino was supposed to develop into a really good player. But what hurts Patino in this instance is his success is getting guys to develop over multiple years and then become stars. Donovan Mitchell, for example, at Louisville. But when you might not have guys now for multiple years, with the way college sports are now, it's become instant success or get out. And I think the key in year 2 is going to be, how does Patino adjust to that in a very competitive Big East conference? This year isn't over yet, and I think Patino even said that he loves these guys, but they've underachieved. And for a St. John's fan that has seen years and years and years of disappointment, this was supposed to be different. Normally, though, it's they struggle in the Big East early part of the schedule where they bury themselves before they get the late wins that kind of false hope. Now, as they started off 4-1 in the Big East, things looked really well, and then everything got flat. For a school that hasn't won a tournament game in decades, practically. So a lot of soul searching for Patino to do this week. A lot of soul search for the team to do this week. They responded well last night. We'll see what they do over the remaining games. They got Creighton at home, Butler on the road, and then DePaul and Georgetown to finish the year. Locally, I think Seton Hall has put themselves in a good position to make the NCAA tournament. They get Butler on Saturday at 8:30 at the Prudential Center. If they beat Butler, they should find a way to make it into the tournament. Right now, they're 17-9 overall. They have at Creighton on the 28th, and then at UConn, Villanova at home, and DePaul at home. If Seton Hall can just win 3 of those games and not lose to DePaul, I think they make it. So I think, again, they are in a good position. They did lose to Villanova last Sunday by 26. Nova's starting to come on the rise, which is pretty good. Rutgers, a huge game tonight. They lost to Minnesota the other day. They are at Purdue. Purdue is favored by 14.5, number 3 team in the country. Rutgers has given Purdue scares in the past, but it's mostly been at the rack. Will they be able to compete with Zach Edey tonight? We'll find out. And then the ACC, Syracuse next plays Saturday against Notre Dame, trying to go to 18-10 on the year. Cuse plays Notre Dame on Saturday, and then Virginia Tech on Tuesday. So we're only a couple weeks away from conference tournaments, and we'll dive into the Big East tournament more in depth then. We'll try to do a show closer to the Big East tournament. We'll see what happens with that, but I love talking conference tournaments. But again, I probably, unless St. John's upsets Creighton, you're not going to see me talk about them that much coming up for the next couple of weeks. So we'll take one more break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the Stadium Series, the success it was locally, and what does it mean for the Rangers, Devils, and Islanders going forward. You're listening to New York State of Sports on IE Sports Radio. One more segment, talking hockey, after this.
What's up, Pittsburgh? This is Ralph DeLeese, the host of the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Are you that passionate, diehard Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, or just a Pittsburgh sports fan? Then please join me on the Injury Report every Tuesday on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports. And I will update you on all that's black and gold and have you telling your Pittsburgh fans and friends what's up with Pittsburgh sports. Tune in Tuesday with me, Ralph Calise, the Yinzer Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Let's go!
Hey sports fans, are you in the market for Florida sports or just keeping up with the latest in the Panhandle? Palm Tree Sports is a dedicated audio hub to all things sports in the Sunshine State. We cover current events, big news, heavily favored opinions all across the NFL, NBA, MLB, and so much more. So come check us out every Saturday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For a down south education on Florida sports and athletics, it's hosted by yours truly, Corey Pujols, and is powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome to the 305, aka the Magic City, and this is Magic City Scoreboard. I'm your host JB, and right here we're gonna talk anything Miami, Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, Miami Hurricanes, Marlins, Panthers, Inter Miami, and even high school football. So join me once a week right here on Magic City Scoreboard on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed to all that is sports.
Magic City Scoreboard, one of two more shows coming to you tonight here on IE Sports Radio. Magic City Scoreboard with JB at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then at 8 p.m. it's the Extra Mile with Daryl and Christopher talking all things auto racing. Really fun Daytona 500 last week. And they got NASCAR coming to Atlanta this week, so you're going to get your fix with some auto racing on that show tonight. We're going to wrap things up with the Stadium Series, which I think couldn't have gone any better for the NHL. And hopefully they make their way back to New Jersey soon. I think MetLife was a great venue for it. If you look at the atmosphere around the game, I think the fans were really into the action. I like the whole theme around the parks that they had around the rink. That was pretty cool. And I'm a big fan of outdoor hockey in general. Like that, even with All-Star Saturday night, I was making it a point to watch some Devils Flyers. Made sure I watched a lot of the Ranger Islander game on Sunday. Even though the sun delayed the game, started the game by like 45 minutes or so. It still brought a lot of drama. You love the rivalry, the physicality. You love the way the players embrace the moment. And you start with Saturday, where, as I told you last week, I was thinking about how these games were not going to be as high scoring because of the conditions. Well, I was totally wrong. Devils winning last Saturday against the Flyers 6-3. Nico Hischier scores 32 seconds into the game. Devils got out to a 4-1 lead and got scoring from other places. Bastion, who only had 3 goals the whole season coming in, he gets 2 goals. Brendan Smith gets his second goal of the year. Devils as a whole, despite Philly getting almost 50 shots, I thought that the goalie did a really good job in this game. Dawes, 45 saves on 48 shots. He's making a case to keep the job while Vanacek's out. And we'll see if New Jersey does make that goalie move at the deadline, which is coming up real soon. I think it's like a couple weeks away. But New Jersey was able to win that one. And then the really fun game on Sunday. Rangers and Islanders. Eric Gustafsson scores 90 seconds in, but then the Islanders have a 4-1 lead a minute into the second period. Rangers had a long winning streak. You might have excused this one, but 2 goals from Vincent Trocheck. Islanders get up 5-3, and what was smart by Peter Laviolette, considering how bad the Islanders are on the penalty kill, is when Rangers had those power plays at the end of the third period, he pulled Shesterkin out of the net and took the aggressive approach with it and said, if we're going to win it or stay in this game, let's do it right now. They get the goal from Kreider to make it 5-4, and then Mika Zibanejad with about a minute and a half left tied the game at 5. And then right out of the gate in overtime, Islanders turn over in their own zone. Artemi Panarin gets the goal that wasn't ruled a goal initially, but because Noah Dobson had moved the net off and instead of it coming off voluntarily, the Rangers found a way to squeak out a 6-5 win. Look, the Rangers are back to being the hottest team in the NHL again. They've won 8 in a row. They picked up a big win on Tuesday because Dallas is a pretty good team. They're one of the better ones in the West. You could, again, excuse the Rangers if they kind of had that letdown after that emotional Stadium Series win. But Igor Shesterkin was fantastic. 41 saves. Adam Fox gets a goal. Capo Caco gets a goal. They get the empty net goal from Trocheck. And Rangers have kind of reasserted themselves in the East again. Remember, we had all that doom and gloom talk at the All-Star break that this team wasn't themselves. And again, there is some issues still there. Jimmy Vesey and Artemi Panarin are banged up. We'll see if they play tonight, which is a huge game in New Jersey against the Devils. Probably bigger for New Jersey with their playoff chances. But, of course, the Devils knocking off the Rangers last year always makes for some emotional play. Rangers have 2 big divisional games this week. Devils tonight, Flyers on Saturday on ABC in Philly. Then they have at Columbus, home and home with Columbus to end February. But you gotta like where this Ranger team is. And again, when you have a squad who's won 8 in a row, and you're looking at Chris Drury, you have to find a way to invest in this team. Because they're a lot of fun. And Capo Caco's starting to play well. Lafreniere's finding his game. This team has got a shot at least making it to a Stanley Cup. And you have to put every resource into making sure they have the best shot at getting to the Stanley Cup based on the play they've had recently. 16 goals in the last 3 games. 7 against Montreal last week, 6 against the Islanders, and then 3 against Dallas. I will give the Islanders this much. I did like their resolve on Tuesday. Normally that kind of game, it kind of puts you down in the dumps a little bit. They go to Pittsburgh. They get a 4-2 lead. They blow that lead in the third period. But then Adam Pelech scores his first goal of the year, less than a minute into overtime. Islanders, if they had just turned some of those 14 overtime losses into wins, they would be right there in the playoffs. But that speaks to, again, when we talk about St. John's in basketball having to hold leads and no lead safe for them. And Ralph, you're absolutely right. No lead is safe for the Islanders right now. But they get a team tonight. They go to St. Louis to play the Blues. Both teams have 60 points. Pretty even game there. They get Tampa at home on Saturday, and then they're at Dallas and at Detroit to end February. Right now, the Devils and Islanders are actually tied with 60 points. Both teams have played the exact number of games, so there's no games at hand stuff. Rangers 6 points ahead of Carolina in the Eastern Conference. Carolina's won 3 straight, or the Rangers would have like an 8 to 10 point lead right now. So I think overall good thing for all 3 locals. I know it was a tough loss for the Islanders, but I think still having that atmosphere. And it was announced during this past weekend that the All-Star Game is coming to UBS Arena in 2026. So think about all the cool events in New York over the next couple of years. Copa America and World Cup. Copa America this year, World Cup in 26. And now you have the NHL All-Star Game in 26. So big events just keep coming to the Big Apple. And UBS is a great arena. I haven't been there yet personally. I look forward to maybe making a trip out there at some point. But I think the Islanders did a good job kind of turning that into their home. It's not quite the same atmosphere as Nassau Coliseum, but it still creates that fun home atmosphere. I think it's better than what Barclays was for them. So coming up next week, we will be next Thursday is the beginning of the NFL Combine. So they start doing all the drills and stuff, which should be fun. Now, it doesn't sound like Robert Saleh is going to be speaking or attending the Combine. I don't think that's a big deal. if I'm a Jet fan personally, I'd rather hear from Joe Douglas than Robert Saleh at this point. I think that the GM has more questions to answer than the coach on how they're going to put this roster together. And then on the Giants front, we're close to free agency. Again, teams can start giving the franchise tags out over the next couple of weeks. And what was interesting about the Giants today, Daniel Jeremiah, who does the draft stuff for NFL Network and does a great job, was asked on a media conference call, what would it cost to get the Giants to go up from 6 in the draft to 3? And Jeremiah said 2 second-rounders, and it could, 2 second-round picks, which would be the 2 this year. Giants do have two second-rounders. I think it's the 37 and 49. But we'll have to see how the Giants evaluate this draft class. Do they feel that Jane Daniels or Drake May are a franchise caliber quarterback? If they do, then you make that deal. But I think it all depends on who falls to 3. If you love Daniels and Daniels gets taken to 2 by Washington, you're not making that move. If your guy falls to New England at 3 and you look at that Patriot roster and they need a lot more than a rookie quarterback right now to get themselves back in contention, you have the pieces to give them more draft collateral. And if you're looking for that franchise guy to kind of keep you on an upward trajectory, then you make that move. But to me, what I'm going to be interested in more in Indianapolis is the GMs. What does Brian Daboll have to say? And what does Joe Schoen have to say? Especially since it sounds like Saquon Barkley's days could be numbered with the Giants. It doesn't sound like that he's going to be a guy that he's going to be able to find a home, especially since the team and the player can't really seem to see them eye to eye on a deal. I think it would be a nightmare for the Giants if he ended up in a place like the Cowboys. If he winds up in the division. I know a lot of people mention like the Texans as an option. But teams have until March 5th for the tag. And then Barkley, if he doesn't get tagged, as was reported by Paul Schwartz, that the Giants are unlikely to tag him, so he should hit free agency. We'll see what happens on March 13th. So we'll come up next week. If the GMs have spoken, we'll react to their thoughts. We'll recap the first week of spring training, baseball games, which is always a lot of fun. We'll do, of course, some Nets, Knicks, and some hockey stuff as well in the first week of MLS action. Again, remember to follow us on Twitter at Rickinator555, at NY State Sports IE. Thanks you guys for tuning into the chat. Thanks Karen, Larry, Jen, Ralph. Everybody here is awesome. Have a great rest of your week here in New York, everybody. Stay warm. Enjoy the start of some baseball. Basketball's back tonight. Hockey's in full swing. Got a lot to cover over the next few weeks or so and months here on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all those sports. So until next week, Ricky Keeler saying, enjoy yourself, everybody.